All right, thank you for being here today. The Oklahoma City Public Schools Board of Education and I have called this press conference today to inform our students, families, and staff and community members that the OKCPS Board of Education is calling for a special board meeting to address one single item, education funding.
On Monday, August 21st, the board will consider a resolution instructing the district's legal counsel and appropriate staff to begin the process of interviewing law firms in order to prepare a lawsuit or lawsuits against the Oklahoma legislature, and specifically the Speaker of the House and the President pro tem in their official capacities. Over the past few years, Oklahoma education funding has decreased dramatically. In fact, Oklahoma is first in the nation for cuts per pupil to education funding. Our funding has dropped while the legislative mandates have remained. This is not sustainable for any school system. Oklahoma's legislative leadership has failed at their constitutional responsibility to provide textbooks for every child and their moral responsibility to put Oklahoma's children and their education first. While doing so, they have obstructed the Oklahoma City Board of Education from performing our constitutional role as intended. This is unacceptable. Legislative leadership has a chance to make this right. When they undoubtedly go into special session later this fall, they can fix the ill-conceived revenue measures that have been struck down or will be struck down by the Oklahoma Supreme Court. They can raise revenue. They can make our children a priority and fund education properly. Then, and only then, will our efforts cease. Make no mistake, we care about all Oklahoma students, and this is why we are proposing this resolution. The board is prepared to exhaust all efforts, including litigation, in our fight to provide a quality education for the children of Oklahoma City Public Schools in Oklahoma. This time, we'll be happy to take questions.
What's the precedence on this? Like, where is this being done right now across the country? I know Kansas right now, I think it's up in the air. And what do you guys hope to get out of it? Is there an amount that you're shooting for?
Well, I think we hope that the legislature goes back in special session and next session and actually does the job that the voters expect them to do, raise revenue and properly fund schools.
Do you have a number you'd like them to raise revenue to?
Well, we've been cut significantly over the last 3 years with the budget cuts. I don't know that we have a specific number, but we want them to provide adequate resources to pay for all the things we're required as a district to provide for students.
We've had to cut about 35 to 40 million in the last 2 years from the Oklahoma City Public Schools budget.
But to answer statewide, I don't have that number off the top of my head.
There's been specific proposals like raising gross production tax, maybe raising income taxes. What specific plan would you get behind in order to properly fund education? Well,
I'm a member of the Oklahoma City Public School Board. I'm not a member of the Oklahoma legislature. So as far as the specifics, I don't care how they do it. That's their job. I just want them to go back to 23rd and Lincoln and do their job.
Are you hoping to get other districts to join you in this?
Yes, I think we'll probably have other districts as well as other interested education organizations at some point in the future that'll join this effort.
Have you followed kind of how this has worked out with other states? I think Kansas did the same thing, and it's a process still going on right now, right?
Yeah, well, I believe Kansas, if I'm not mistaken, won the lawsuit. They're still working on the funding portion. So, and hopefully, my comment on that would be, hopefully if they will go back into session and do their job, we won't have to have the conversation down the road of how successful we were in a lawsuit, how are they going to fund. Hopefully they'll go back and do their job and we won't get to that point.
There's been calls by the governor, even from Democratic leadership, to go back to special session, but the Speaker's office is saying, let's wait and hold off until some of the Supreme Court decisions go by. What would you tell the Speaker?
Well, I think, I'm not going to presume to tell him when they should go in. I think it's a foregone conclusion that the governor's going to call them in. And when that happens, I think they need to be ready to come in and have meaningful conversations, not just with the governor and the state superintendent and members of the leadership team, but also legislators on both sides of the aisle who have called continually for increased funding for education.
And I would say the students of this state need adequate funding now. Their education is important, and we owe this to them. So we can't wait for a solution. They need to act with urgency at this time.
Mark, you said that you mentioned textbooks. quote. You mentioned textbooks as a specific potential constitutional requirement. I know you might know that off the top of your head, actually, from your background. What?
I'll give you a copy of the article in the Constitution. I actually have one, so I'll provide that afterwards. And yes, that is something that the Constitution clearly says the legislature should provide free of charge to every child. We haven't had dedicated textbook or instructional material funding in over 2 years. And we're at the point in this district at some buildings, because of the adoption process and the fact that books are no longer being produced that we are using, we're at a point where kids can't take books home because we can't afford to lose them because they can't be replaced. So it's really at a crisis mode in terms of instructional materials.
And you can't thus buy a whole, you can't change the books because you can't afford to buy a whole new
Well,
set.
and in some instances the state's not went through an adoption process, so there are no new books to buy, and the companies have quit manufacturing the old books. So you get in that catch-22 where there are no old books to buy and there are no new books to buy, so you have to piece together what you've got. Or I know some districts in the past, when they've had that issue, have went to other districts and picked up extras that they've had to fill out what they need. So it's at a point of critical mass, not just for us, but for schools across the state.
And last year we were supposed to adopt new math textbooks. We are long overdue for new math curriculum, and the entire textbook adoption for the state was called off because there was no funding. Our kids need great math books now.
How much are you prepared to spend on legal action?
Well, I think the cost of legal action is yet to be determined. We'll have to see how many other districts and interested parties want to join the lawsuit. We'll also have to determine, as we begin this process after Monday night, if this resolution passes, of determining what each of those lawsuits will be, and there could be multiple lawsuits, and then trying to determine what an estimated cost will be. So I think at some point in the future we'll have an estimated amount, but I think that'll be several weeks down the road.
Hey, Mark, you mentioned mandates in the resolution. Mandates you're talking about.
Well, textbooks, we've got not achieving classroom excellence textbooks. What did we talk about? Reading Sufficiency Act. Gene, you have a list of those, and we can provide that to you. There are tons. Some of them don't really make sense on the face when you read them in terms of knowing what they are, but almost everything the state funds is either underfunded or they've cut the funding for.
Is there a dollar amount that you're going to mention in these lawsuits? How much?
I assume once we begin the process of putting those suits together and the legal team, whoever that ends up being, probably there will at least be some idea that we'll be able to provide, but at this point, no. I mean, I think the superintendent was clear. We had to cut a little over $30 million last year from our budget, but to extrapolate that out among all school districts, we haven't done that yet.
Which other districts have maybe contacted you guys saying they'd be interested in joining the lawsuit or filing a similar resolution?
So at this time, we notified some local school districts just to let them know we were having this press conference, but we have not had the conversation yet about whether they'd like to join. That's a next step for us. The local districts in our metro area and the Tulsa superintendent.
Superintendent, I probably should ask you this yesterday. Can you discuss some of the more difficult decisions, cuts you guys have had to make, the stresses that lower funding has put on the district in general and schools specifically? I know that arts and sports have both taken cuts, transportation, stuff like that. So what are the biggest impacts for you?
Sure. In my first 30 days as superintendent, when I came on board, I had to cut $30 million from our budget. And in doing so, I had to cut approximately 200 teachers, which raised class sizes, made cuts to electives that schools had. We laid off 100 people from central office, so administrators, 100 people from operations. We canceled textbook purchases, made cuts to arts, athletics, instructional materials that from the school budgets. It devastated our schools. And not only did that $30 million not come back last spring, we had to cut additional funding and raise class sizes again. And we just can't keep doing this. Our kids need us to stand up and demand that we have adequate funding for them to get a great education in this state.
So that being said, funding's been an issue for a long time. Why now file or consider filing a lawsuit? Is there like one specific thing that you're like, okay, enough is enough, or what?
I think funding has been an education for years in this state. but I think more so in the last year and a half, we're at a point of critical mass, and we're really at the point where, as a board and a district, we're able to provide a basic level of education, but to do all the things that are required for every kid, to give them the opportunity that they deserve, that we're morally, as a society, obligated to provide these children. We don't have the resources to do that.
So basically, it's just a matter of underfunded mandates.
Any more questions?
Hey, Mark, talk a little briefly about your role for these other board members. Are they part of the finance committee?
Well, this originated, I presented this to the Finance Committee a little over a week ago. There are only 3 board members, well, really 4 with Board Chair Lewis, myself, Rebecca Budd, and Gloria Torres on that committee. So the role of the board is going to be on Monday when we pass this, if we pass it, which I suspect we will.
How long had the district been thinking about this lawsuit?
I've been thinking about this lawsuit since probably a month after I was on the board, and it became painfully obvious that the resources we have versus what's expected and what we should be doing for kids don't match.
Even before you were on the board, Mark, were you already beginning to see that there was just going to have to be more done at the legislative level there, that there was going to have to be some kind of leverage? I'm just kind of wondering if you were already thinking about this even before you got on the board, just as a concerned citizen.
I don't know that I was thinking necessarily about a lawsuit, but yes, I've thought for some time that there needs to be more leverage. And I go back to the moral obligation. As a society, one of the most important moral obligations we have is to provide a quality education and opportunity for our kids. And we're shortchanging them, and we've shortchanged them for several years, but we're at a point where shortchanging them is really potentially going to lose a generation of kids. I mean, we know based on brain development and early childhood research, if they don't get what they need in those early grades, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, those building blocks, they're not going to be as successful in high school as kids that do. And we're at the point where those things are things that are being squeezed. And I say enough's enough.
Mark, it's sort of a joke around the Capitol. I forget the specific date, but there's the constitutional requirement to fund education first. Is that possibly something we're going to look at?
That's in the resolution. And I think, if this passes, it would be my hope that the board would have an expectation, and whoever joins us on these other lawsuits, that actually be done. The law is that the education budget is passed by April 1st. And so my hope would be that if they don't have an education budget passed and on the governor's desk by April 1st, that yes, we seek legal action starting April 2nd.
Because, I mean,
the law is the law. Just follow it. They created it.
But no one's ever, I don't think they've ever achieved it, maybe once, right? So,
well, it's not a matter of achieving. It's a matter of following the law you passed. And if they passed it, then they must have passed it for a reason, and it must be a good idea. So let's follow it.
All right, last question.
So, Mark, this lawsuit you're talking about, this may not happen until April 2nd. Is that what you just said?
Well, I think what Trace was talking about is the legal requirement that the legislature pass an education budget by April 1st. So I don't think we would have any kind of legal option until April 1st. And if that didn't happen on April 1st, then on April 2nd, I think we could proceed. And I have no reason to think, based on the past conduct of the House and Senate, that they'll actually have a budget for education done and passed and on the governor's desk by April 1st. So we'll wait and see. Maybe so.